And GB News can now reveal that Jess Phillips rejected a request to meet with Oldham Council as it requested government support to investigate the town's grooming gang scandal. So I'll just read that again. Jess Phillips rejected a request to meet with Oldham Council as it requested government support to investigate the town's grooming gangs scandal. The Safeguarding Minister wrote to the local authority in December to say that neither her nor Home Secretary Yvette Cooper would be able to meet the council leadership due to the demands on their time. Emily, your views on that. What does that say, do you think, about Jess Phillips and Yvette Cooper?
I just want to say, I'm not one of those who's going to sort of go in full throttle against Jess Phillips, because she has actually done a lot of campaigning on women's safety and ending sexual violence against women. I'm pretty flabbergasted to hear that, because I think, you know, if you've done the research, as I have, and Jess Phillips certainly understood what went on in those grooming gangs, they've come up with all sorts of excuses about why they wouldn't hold that extra inquiry which the council were asking for, and they tried to cover it up with all sorts of nonsense, where the fact was there were very good reasons why that council wanted that specific inquiry, not the larger one that Labour tried to paint had happened, because it really didn't go into that much detail in the grooming gangs, actually. So the fact that she's like saying, we were too busy to even meet the council, I'm kind of flabbergasted by that, actually.
This, Matthew?
I think the government has got itself in a mess, because Number 10 is saying one thing, Jess Phillips seems to be saying and doing another thing. I think you're absolutely right. Jess has got a great track record on campaigning against violence against women and girls, but on the grooming gangs things, there's obviously something going on. She obviously is personally kind of not happy about inquiries.
I wonder why that.
Well, I mean, she wasn't a council leader at the time. She wasn't. So I don't know why she personally has got into this. So I think that it's becoming untenable. They've got to have a clear policy and stick to it, and therefore, I think her future in that role may be in doubt.
She does have a track record of campaigning for women and girls' safety when it's white perpetrators. But she clearly doesn't want to go near this with a barge pole. Why is that? I think it's blatantly obvious. Look at what happened in her seat at the election. She almost got swept away in a tide of sectarian radical politics, and she does not want to deal with something that may involve the voters that she lost at the last election in that capacity. I think it's quite clear. And given that so much of Labour politics, this politics on the left, is purely performative, why she wouldn't prioritise a simple meeting with Oldham Council that would have avoided this disastrous headline is beyond me.
This is the thing. I'll just reiterate, if you are just joining us now, that breaking news is that Jess Phillips rejected a request to meet with Oldham Council in relation to the grooming gang scandal. Apparently so did Yvette Cooper. This is according to this news now. And the quote is, due to the demands on their time. Now, we've seen a lot of stuff at the dispatch box recently from both Yvette Cooper and Jess Phillips, and that makes it look as though you could make the case anyway that perhaps the victims and survivors of some of the most appalling abuse imaginable were not worth the time of those two ministers.
No, it's not going to look good, because I remember Keir Starmer in the lead up to the election saying that, making this big point, this sort of great big statement that he was going to eradicate sexual violence against women within 10 years. Well, that's a great statement, but that is totally performative. Sexual violence against women is an incredibly complex thing to solve. And if Jess Phillips, and as I said, I feel uncomfortable attacking women who have actually done a lot around sexual violence against women. But I do think that to me, I am actually genuinely quite shocked. I understand the reasons why, as you've explained them, why they would feel uncomfortable about it, and because so many Labour councils were at the heart of the grooming gangs. But it's not to say that they, and in some cases, I'm afraid they were actually involved. You know, they were in some of the investigations. Both local police and councils were seen to ignore a lot of these claims. So I can see why they don't want. But the council here is literally saying, OK, we know there's a problem and we want you to come in and properly look at it. And for the local MP to say, I haven't got time to come and meet you.
Does this also drag in the Home Secretary, though? Sorry, I know we are a bit pressed for time, but Matthew, I mean, does she have to go over this as well?
I mean, I'd like to hear more about exactly, what happened with it there. I think Jess Phillips has got herself tying herself in knots on this. You can't be having anybody tie themselves in knots on this. It may be better for somebody else to do that job.
OK. All right, well, there we go. Well, it is breaking news. We obviously have not yet heard, anyway, from Jess Phillips on this. I imagine if she were here, she'd say she's doing everything she possibly can and repeat some of the lines she said before about how she cares deeply about this issue, etc. But I think, let's be honest, this is going to be a huge story tomorrow, so we'll wait to hear from her then.
Charlie, this is some months ago now, but nevertheless an interesting find.
Yeah, it's in December and it's come through from a Freedom of Information request that's been shared with GB News. And in this letter to the Council's Chief Executive in December, the Safeguarding Minister, Jess Phillips, said that neither she nor the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, would be able to meet with the Council's executives due to demands on their time. She did, however, say that in regards to previous correspondence, that they would support a local-led inquiry there in the model of the Telford inquiry. However, within 2 weeks of this letter being sent, there was an explosion of coverage on this issue due to another letter revealed by GB News with regards to a Freedom of Information request, which found that the government had rejected a request from Oldham for a government-led inquiry. Now, because of the weeks of pressure that was generated by that revelation from both media and also from lots of politicians and also just the public, we have now seen meetings taking place between the Home Secretary and the Safeguarding Minister and Oldham Council. So it has forced the question, did they only have that meeting or meetings because people sort of started pressuring them on this issue? I did reach out to the Home Office yesterday for a response on this and our revelation that they had rejected a request for a meeting. We haven't heard back, but there has been a reaction from the Shadow Justice Secretary, Robert Jenrick, who said that it's disgraceful that the supposed Safeguarding Minister turned down a meeting to discuss an investigation into the rape gangs with Oldham Council. What could possibly be more important? He said it's a dereliction of duty. He then goes on to say that Sir Keir Starmer has called for countless inquiries, but somehow this doesn't qualify. Calling Keir Starmer, he says, two-tier Keir. Obviously, an allegation and a description of the Prime Minister that the government has pushed back on very strongly over the best part of a year. And Mr Jenrick says that Sir Keir Starmer should hang his head in shame. We've also reached out to the Home Office for a response on that as well. Nothing heard yet, but in previous statements, a spokesperson for the Home Office has told us that they're bringing out new funding and new support for abuse gang victims, including, they say now, possibly more than 5 local inquiries. But the only one we know that's going to go ahead, the only one that we know that's got government funding, is Oldham. And that was only achieved, we believe, after what we covered on this issue in January.
All right.